second by Mrs. Holloway. Any comments, questions, or concerns? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Turn time over to Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. I'd like to make a motion to approve the treasurer's report for August of 2022.
Motion on the table to approve treasurer's report of August 2022. Is there a second? Second by Mrs. C. Anybody have any comments or questions about the treasurer's report? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. President's report. I don't have anything as of right now, so we'll go into visitor comments. Mr. Clee, pretty sure you know the drill. Go ahead.
Dr. Sedlock's August 25th overview about homeless children and the PASD raised so many issues, begged so many questions. An absolute bureaucratic maze about homeless education, the American Rescue Plan, the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act, the Every Student Succeeds Act, the ESSA Pennsylvania Consolidated State Plan, the Pennsylvania Education for Homeless Children and Youth State Plan, unaccompanied homeless youth, etc., can be found at the PDE website. The Federation for American Immigration Reform, or FAIR, also has a website. A 2016 dated FAIR document titled "The Elephant in the Classroom: Mass Immigration's Impact on Public Education" is a report about what every parent and taxpayer should know about immigration and the K-12 public education crisis. This document notes that public school districts across the nation are suffering under a massive unfunded mandate imposed by the federal government, the requirement to educate millions of illegal aliens. This data from FAIR links to the 1982 Palmyra v. Doe U.S. Supreme Court case in its ruling to require K-12 public school districts to treat illegal aliens like citizens and provide them with education and other services at taxpayer expense. I then discovered a document by Eric Kennedy, Esquire, a Kentucky School Boards Association Director of Advocacy. This document was presented to a school funding task force on August 9, 2021, and addressed the financial impact of unfunded mandates on local school districts, gave a working concept of an unfunded mandate, and pointed out how both the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act and the ESSA significantly burden American K-12 public school districts with federal unfunded mandates. As a Pennsylvanian, I'm aware of how on a number of occasions during the Biden administration, a sizable number of illegal alien children have been transported into various parts of the Commonwealth. The incidents I'm aware of have been reported to the public. One can only wonder how many unreported transports of illegal alien children into Pennsylvania have occurred since February of 2021. The 1982 outcome of Palmyra v. Doe, the 1987 passage of the McKinney Homeless Assistance Act, and the amending of the McKinney-Vento, along with the 2015 enactment of the ESSA, brings to mind the term Trojan Horse Initiatives. A Trojan Horse Initiative is promoted by sponsors as a policy pathway to an outcome likely to be popular with much of the public, while actually containing components primed to lead to less popular outcomes, but nevertheless outcomes in alignment with the true motives of the initiative sponsors. Remember the SDS of the 60s? Remember how the issue is never the issue? The issue is always the revolution. The second annual Socialist Scholars Conference, held in 1966, hosted Richard Cloward and Francis Piven, two professors who were members of the Democratic Socialists of America. During that conference, insights were given into what has become known as the Cloward-Piven strategy, a strategy that will prime the fall of America by overloading the government bureaucracy with a flood of impossible demands, thus pushing society into crisis and economic collapse. A book titled The Coercive Utopians, Social Deception by America's Power Players touches upon not only Richard Cloward, but also upon a man named Saul Alinsky. This book points out how one of the favorite methods of the utopians in staking out a claim to power is to organize radical community activism, a method developed by Saul Alinsky. Actually, the NEA has used none other than Saul Alinsky as a consultant to train their own staff. a 1972 NEA training document titled "A Landscape for Teacher Organizers" made the case that teachers should be used to organize, not just for changes in the classroom, but for social change. Ponder that. So do you think strategies of Richard Cloward, Francis Piven, Saul Alinsky, or others could be operating within the capacities of the PASD, strategies primed to help push society towards crisis and economic collapse? If so, what should the directors of the PASD board be doing about it?
Thank you very much. Mrs. John.
As someone write my speech. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States. I'm all familiar with that. Mrs. Markle would actually be rolling on the floor right now because I'm here to promote history and to ask for history. Thankful Mr. Guy too taught my children as well. And last year I found out Constitution Day is federally mandated programs. We have to recognize Constitution Day. I contacted Coach Bird and we talked about, I'm a great idea person. I'm not great to follow through. I need a team sometimes to help me finish what I like to think of as a good idea. So I just wanted to know if we could do something. I know he does something in his class. There might be a few other teachers. But I just wanted to see if there's something we could do, even small this year. It's on a Saturday. I don't know if we're required then, if it's on a Saturday versus a school day. But I would like to ask permission maybe for next year. If we can't do a little something this year, can we do something next year? And I'd be willing to spearhead it if someone would help me like stay on track. So that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. I would just say, something like that, definitely reach out to the administration, about who recognizes it on a different day or something. Just get cool again,
I'll reach out to you, Lori, to tell you what we do every year and certainly open guidance. So I'll be in touch.
Okay. Curriculum.
Okay. Curriculum met on August 25th. There was a presentation by Dr. Steinmiller on the high school speech and debate club. Deb Buckfelder, former middle school math teacher, talked about the role of Palmyra Public Library in the community, also helping the students of Palmyra School District. Dr. Setlock talked about homeless overview within the school district. We had Jerry Clee do a public comment asking questions regarding homeless funding. And out of all that, we have a motion. We have a motion to approve the Palmyra High School Speech and Debate Club.
I have a motion on the table to approve Palmyra High School Speech and Debate Club. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Fisher. Does anybody have any comments or questions regarding that? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Grab. Ms. Brady?
Mr. Jones, have the Staffing and Administration Committee meeting minutes from August 25th of 2022. Most board members were present, absent Ms. Gilligan and Mr. Jones. The first item on the agenda was the PSBA election of officers. Second one with the motion this evening? I don't believe so. Just the board reviewed the candidates as listed for the PSBA election of officers. The second item on the agenda was the FEMA/PMA Act 44 Compliant Emergency Operations Plan Agreement. The board reviewed this Act 44 Compliant Emergency Operations Plan Agreement with Rain Public Planning in preparation of a motion at the September 8th regular board meeting. Mr. Laudermillick had public comment. Questions regarding labor in relation to employee retention. The meeting adjourned at 7:30 p.m. and the next meeting of the Staffing and Administration Committee is scheduled for this evening after the Finance Committee and District Office Boardroom and via Zoom. On that, we also have the agenda. So forgive me, this is one area where I'm not sure the proper protocol. Do I make the motion to approve the consent agenda and then we discuss it, or we could discuss it prior?
Motion, second, and then
It's been
And then
discussion.
discuss. Okay, thank you. So I would like to make a motion to approve the staffing and administration committee meeting consent agenda.
I have a motion on the table to approve the Staffing Administration Committee consent agenda. Is there a second? Second by Mrs. Singh. Any comments, questions? Dr. Kepler, do you want to go through?
please, I'd like to highlight the first one in particular is the well-dressed gentleman that joined us tonight is the first item on our agenda. I'll use the word chief. Richard Wiley, Rick, is here tonight. Rick is our recommended candidate to be our school police officer. Long career in law enforcement, from Philadelphia PD to local Lower Soterra to recently retired from Melbourne, Florida. So leading departments and has a breadth of experience there. In meeting Rick through the interview process, we met for a couple hours today. A go-getter that's going to do great things for us as he comes in and reoperationalizing a department that we had on. So, Rick, I'm glad you're with us tonight. You're welcome to say hello if you'd like.
Hi, as you said, my name is Rick Wiley, and God, I've been in law enforcement my whole life, since I graduated high school, basically. And it's interesting because I look at my career as chapters in a book. And this is a new chapter for me. I had a long career in Philadelphia. That was probably the most interesting time in my career. But I transitioned out of that, and for some reason I thought, hey, it's a great idea to become a chief of a small town. And after I got my master's degree, I thought this is the place to go. And I was fortunate enough to go to Lower Soterra. And I was there for 7 years. And we all know this to be the truth. Your wife is the boss in the family, right? So my wife said, let's move to Florida. So I applied for a position in West Melbourne, Florida. I was fortunate enough to get that position as the chief of police. So I had 52 sworn officers and 11 civilians that I commanded during that time line. And you got to understand this. I came from a large agency of 7,000 people. Now I have 52. So it was very, very different for me, and Lower Soterra is even smaller than that. I had 15 officers and a civilian administrative assistant. So great communities, very different. But I embraced every position I've ever had. And today, when I was walking around the high school with Dr. Kepler, it occurred to me when I was captain of the 18th district, 50th confinement in Southwest Philadelphia. My first year there, I had 27 homicides. I had a shooting outside West Philadelphia High School. There was drugs and things were going crazy in that high school. So I had to take control of that district. And I walked around today thinking, oh my gosh, what a difference. I went from West Philly to Palmyra Area School District as a police officer. And I am just overwhelmed with joy, I guess is the word I'm going to use. And, when I drive to work every day, I thank God that I have the life I've had. I have a beautiful wife. I have two daughters. And the reason why, and everybody's going to think that I'm crazy moving from Florida back to Pennsylvania. And they all ask me, what are you doing? And I said, well, I have 6 grandchildren. And 4 of them are a mile from our house, which is bad anyway. And then I have 2 additional children that live outside of Baltimore, Maryland. So that's about an hour and 15 minutes. So we've already had a birthday party for one of my grandchild recently. But today I was walking around and I was like, I called a friend of mine from Philly PD and I said, hey, I just landed the best job of my life. And he goes, what are you doing? I said, believe it or not, I'm a school police officer. He said, you got to be kidding me. He said, you're going from chief to a police officer? I said, yes, but you got to understand how great this place is. I walked around, they have a pool, they have a gym, they have people that actually smile and say hello to me. And I said,
You didn't have a uniform on.
The kids are polite. I'm really impressed. But I am so thrilled, and I'm honored to be your school police officer. And trust me, I will put in 110%. I enjoy my job. I show up early and stay late if I have to. And I really sincerely enjoy working with children. I was a camp counselor. I was a youth counselor. I've been around children my entire career. I worked with them in Philly PD. I worked with many schools, by the way. I was in special units, dealing with very many different situations. But here is going to give me the opportunity to I'm going to call it where the rubber meets the ground, and I'll be right out there, and you're going to see me all over the place because I'm a little hyper, which is good and bad. Just ask my wife. But it's going to be an interesting part of my life, and I'm going to embrace it. And I want to shout out to Dr. Kapler because he is awesome. Just going through this process and just talking with him. I've had other job offers, I'll be honest with you, but I'm not taking it. More money, more prestige. I don't want to do that. I want to do something I feel fulfilled at the end of the day, and that I'm doing something that contributes to our community. Because I'm part of this community now, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm going to take a very big interest in everybody here. And if I could save a child, if I could help out and make an impression and mold that person into a better person, a better version of himself, I'm here to do that. And everybody here tonight, if you have anything you ever want to ask me or confide in me, I'm here for you because I'm working for the community. I'm working for the school. I'm getting paid for this, and that's kind of awesome too, by the way. So I want to thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to service the area and to be part of this community because you have got a great community. You have a fantastic superintendent. I will tell you that. I've dealt with many of them, and he's outstanding. I'm going to tell you that from the bottom of my heart. So thank you, and
I'll pay you later.
and that's going to pay dividends. Thank you very much. I'm sorry if I rambled on, but I'm just excited to be here, honestly.
Yeah, I wanted to give you that opportunity. This is an important hire for this district and this board, and kudos to this board is the body that brought forward that we need to revisit having a school police officer and fully support that. And administration is fully on board, and we're looking forward to you. We're waiting on a start date. You'll notice it's a to be determined as we're still waiting for the court petition to come back, which should be any moment now, but no sooner than September 26th. Should the board approve this here, momentarily we'll send out some type of communication here in the next few work days to our families.
And I guarantee I don't have a criminal record. I guarantee you I've never been fired or disciplined. So my record's pretty clean and my background is pretty easy.
And your sport and proper haircuts.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you very much.
Also on our agenda tonight, you see our transfer of Chris McGarry with Stacy Hauser's retirement. Opportunity to thank Stacy for what I believe 28 years in the school district. I'm retiring. Stacy's last day is Monday. So Carissa will be assuming that role should you approve tonight. See a variety of support staff hires, additional substitutes tonight. Making sure you have the substitute various rates that we pay on for approval. I want to thank Shane Manning, our head coach for wrestling, is stepping down. His work at Five Stones is the gym there, and it's more than a gym. They were actually on the news this week, I saw. His time there is too much of a commitment that he doesn't want to shortchange our kids, is what he has indicated to Mr. Weidler. The aforementioned from committee last week, PSBA election of officers, and tonight you would also be approving the Rain Public Planning Agreement to work with us to do our all hazards planning rewrite.
Have any other comments or questions regarding that? I would just like to ask if you have the opportunity to have any conversations with Ray Public Planning and what their feelings are. Comfortable moving forward?
Very comfortable. I've reviewed some of his work from other districts. I spoke on the phone and in anticipation of and approval tonight. I already have a meeting scheduled with them next week. Unless you deny, I'll cancel if that's the case, but we're ready to go.
Thanks.
Yeah, very pleased.
Nice. Hearing other comments or questions, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. With that, it goes to board communications. Again, they're there for public comment. I'll just, not public comment, public consumption. I'll just leave it up to, again, at this time, I've only heard from 3 or 4 board members. I haven't heard of a majority that would like to bring that back to committee. It's pretty much all the communications about the LERTA. If there is a board member, board members that would like to or whatever, let me know later tonight or next week. But at this point, it's a dead issue to bring back to committee unless the majority of the board wants to bring it back to the committee. That said, hearing no other issues or anything, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
First by Mrs. Fisher, second by Mr. Gilligan. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. We're adjourned. Keep this party rolling. So
Recording stopped.
All right, buildings and grounds. I see the policy 707 use of school facilities is on this week's agenda as a result of some conversation. Dr. Tiller.
Simply that. I think it's the request of this board to have discussions tonight regarding use of facilities. So really the floor is open. I think some of the issues were relative to how we rent, when we rent, how often we rent, what we rent, and the rate at which we rent. So those are the topics. We're prepared in large part to answer questions you have. In essence, the use of facility policy, all of those items that I just went over are basically controlled by you, the board, through this policy. Policy currently lists 4 different tiers of renters, or groups 1 through 4. Group 1 being basically our student groups and school-related groups. Group 2 are community-based groups, and policy gives you some ideas: PTO, civic baseball, Parks and Rec. Group 3 are entities that are within the community where their home base is here. I'm trying to think what some of the examples are there that they might give. You have a list. Thank you. Sure. So group 3's National Guard, Palmyra Adult Leagues, VFW, Twilight, Volleyball, Prevail Volleyball, Palm Squares. Group 4 are predominantly your for-profit entities that rent. And the policy lays that out, and then the rates at which they rent.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I mean, again, like I said, I think I would like for us to, make all facilities, grass fields, whatever available. I would like to see if we could, do a little bit more research on the cost, our charges. I don't have an issue with necessarily the groupings. I think those stand, but I would like us to look at. Again, I can only speak from a lacrosse standpoint, because that's what I know, but what do we rent that facility for to Hogan's?
The turf is put up here on the screen for folks to. Grass fields. So there's the athletic complex. So Hogan's would be a group 4, so they would pay $110 an hour per field. If they wanted the ticket booth, press box, or scoreboard, some additional hourly rates there. So that gives you, that's the turf. Grass fields, less than that. They are here.
So roughly, they're paying us like $1,600 for rent for the weekend.
Yeah, there's the grass field, $25 for that's groups 1 and 2.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like for us to do some research, because I think that's way undervalued, to be honest.
We'll be the first ones to tell you that when you factor in costs, again, if we have to cover it with staff, custodian, what have you, we basically cover costs. They get charged for that custodial coverage. The challenge we have is, A, we're short-staffed in custodial maintenance. It's a union shop, if you will. So seniority plays a role. If nobody wants it, the overtime, it goes to the least senior person, and they're forced to take the overtime. And then we lose people because they don't want to do that. Yep. So we've come over the years, we've accommodated and tried to work with some booster clubs where, they'll staff it and clean up. And we have to go through to meet our contractual obligations. We go through our support staff, making sure nobody wants it. We've gone other routes, but even when they do work it, it basically covers costs for them. There's nothing in here, to your point, that covers costs associated with all the behind the scenes work.
Yeah.
If we have to line the grass field for a soccer tournament, a cross tournament, or what have you, we have to get that done, and that's not paid for. That cost isn't shared, hourly labor nor material. It's part of just the 100 and whatever the grass field rate is.
Yeah.
So when the turf project went in, there was a request for an additional position to help us staff that. And that did not make the budget back in 2021, whatever that first year was. So we've been added that facility without additional help. And it's a challenge for us. So certainly the rates are something we can look at.
Yeah, I mean, that's really my thing is I would just like to see this. I mean, again, I want to be careful so we don't price ourselves out. But I mean, I know at one time when I was involved in the youth lacrosse more so, I want to say like on a tournament, and I know at Ridge they get to do a lot more fields, so they spread their costs out over the benefit there. I want to say they rent Ridge for like $3,000 a weekend, for like 3,500. It's something that's a pretty substantial, and obviously the turf is a much nicer facility. I get it, you can only have, we've got 2 fields, possibly 3, but I would just like us to maybe increase the hourly rate. Something, I mean, if you guys can bring us some recommendations on where we think the market.
That's fair. My interest went back and looked at Darcy's files for this item, and it comes up every 5 or 6 years, so different iterations in the file in there. In the last one, the pricing was really focused around what is everybody else charging in the area. And Darcy had information in there about like here's what it would cost us to do this, and so working from that kind of here's cost, we should probably add something if we're going to. It then got kind of back into we don't want to price ourselves out, so let's just make it what the average is around the area. So I would very much welcome taking a look at the costs from that standpoint. I think what the wish and what we would like to be doing with the fields, we're really just covering costs right now. So we're not moving that forward or necessarily making funds. We're covering the costs of a lot of what's going on. But I would like to look at this and bring forward some things to show how much profit could be made at different levels of rental fees.
I think, and I believe you guys know, I'm never short of words, but I'll try to sum it up and shut it up with this. But I think we're doing, to your point, I think it's a big disservice to the community because, whatever anybody wants to say, whether the money was donated, as a bond or whatever, I hear the famous, no tax, no school district dollars were used to pay for the facility. No, it's not. The bottom line is, and we've been over this before, we have a loan on that facility, which means we make a payment on that loan, which means the dollars are being spent by the school district. So anybody that wants to, send an email or whatever that it was fully funded, it was whatever, sorry, it falls on deaf ears for me because there's a loan and I'm paying on a loan, which means school district's paying for that. With that said, I think as part of this discussion, if you guys could, I would like for you guys to reach back out to Internet and let's try to mend that relationship. I think there might have been some hurt over sponsorships at the facility, some things like that.
That's just something so they spent almost $6,000 this last year.
Yeah.
So we can definitely take a look, but that's another, and I wasn't as quite prepared with the turf facility as much as the grass.
Well, even the grass, I mean, I'm talking about all, but what I'm getting at is I think,
Well, some of those, there's a greater cost for us to prepare and rent the field than there would just be to not provide anything. So some of that, our baseball fields, the grass baseball fields we have, we don't really use anymore because our varsity, JV, all of our teams are able to use the turf field. So for us to prepare a grass field to rent it, it's going to cost us more to prepare that field to rent than money we're getting in to rent it. So it doesn't make
well, I know
financial sense to do some of it.
at one time, forgive me, I forget the gentleman's name, but it's Brad, if I remember. I know at one time they were maintaining our facilities as part of an agreement. And like I said, I don't know the full story. I don't know the full history. I'm just saying, I know that they rent their facilities substantially more than we do. Granted, they've got some indoor or whatever. I'm not trying to, I think not only are we doing a disservice to the community as far as, the facility, a revenue generator like it could be, but when we undercut so much, we actually do a disservice to our businesses in the community. You know what I mean? Where, that they've got some great marketing that they do. They know they tap people, places. I know it might be harder, to do, but I know they go for like 5 weekends in a row where they rent to a girls lacrosse game, right? I mean, if there's some kind of an agreement, like to your point, where they can maintain our grass fields for us, but if the schedule works, they can use our facility. Again, all I'm saying is bridge the gap back again, I think, with them, from what I've heard in the brief correspondence I've had with them, they would like, again, rumor hearsay, I don't know, but they similar claim they weren't approached about a sponsorship for the turf project. It sounded like they might have been open to that, for additional monies. They're definitely people in the community that I think have whatever.
There's space out there.
Space out there.
Good. Well, that's what I'm saying, right? This might be an opportunity to what I mean? I don't know who needs to call who or whatever, but that's what.
Dr. Pepper and I can coordinate reaching out.
Yeah. And the only last part of that is I know that we talked about this the last one. Have we done anything with the winterization of the facility and what the cost would be to do that? And,
We have a rough estimate that he was able to take right around, he thinks, with putting in some additional space heaters, insulation, that we would be able to do something to that building for about $20,000.
Okay.
So if it's something you want us to explore further, or
I mean, I would, but again, it needs to be a majority with that. So I mean, if that's something that wants to be put on the agenda, we need another 3 or 4 board members. I mean, we need another 4 board members there. We could put that on the agenda. So I mean, that's open to you guys if you want. I think we should. I think it's part of the whole marketing for rental use throughout the year rather than just. That's just one thing.
I'd like to see it on there.
The only things I'd like to see regarding the turf use are maybe just a handful of comparables, and I wouldn't go nuts. And then what are our costs rather to turn the lights on? And then we'll kind of work backwards from there and see where we can.
Well, I think we put in we've talked about that a couple of different times with different facilities of even then building in a capital, portion of that of what we charge here, we expect this amount to be set aside based on that usage.
And I remember early on we were having conversations just about, trash hauling. I mean, the dumpsters were filling up as that's costing us more too. So these, some of these costs I'd like to see integrated in that number to turn the lights on.
And we will focus probably a little bit more on, because I think for an apples to apples, looking at for-profit entities that do that versus other schools doing.
Yeah.
That may be in the same boat we're in, but it would show differential information.
Thank you.
a couple of the things that we face is how far into the fall, for example, we rent grass fields is a challenge. From Maintenance had their way, it would probably be October 1. They pushed to say we can do October 15th. But any further, when we're doing aeration and overseeding, we're getting to temperatures where we're not going to get grass regrowth. And the amount of use we have, it's damaging our fields because we can't get that regrowth time in the fall. So we currently rent pretty much through the month of October. It's a routine on our, predominantly talking about our varsity softball field, JV softball field, north side. Are the three biggest ones there. Challenge for us.
Yeah, and I would say look at it, right? I mean, if it's a 1 day rental or a 1 day use in the month, I mean, I think I'd argue that doesn't. Now you're talking about if there's a baseball tournament or a soccer tournament that's going to use it for 2 days of solid, whatever. I'd agree, but like if it's a 1 day, no bars open. If lacrosse needs it for their December fundraiser, it's a 1 day. I'm going to tell you, I find it really hard to believe that field gets tore up that bad in 1 day from lacrosse. It's not heavy, maybe the goalies part, but it's nothing worse than what football would do. But again, if it was an all day weekend thing, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I would agree. But I mean, I'm just again. It's back to WIRA, it's back to all that stuff, right? I can't sit here and tell everybody that the district's in financial strain and we need to continue to raise taxes or not. Everybody on Zoom and everything. Josh didn't say raise taxes. I'm just hearing the thing. I can't take that stance 2 months ago and then sit here and look at these and say we're not using our facilities the way we should. We're not, and I'm not saying we are. I'm just, again, we need to maximize everything. Right? I mean, everything needs to be as maximized as we can. So that's mine. So if anybody else would like to see that on agenda, great. If anybody else, no. Again, we need more than two.
In terms of winterization of the building, is there anybody?
I mean, it's so out of my realm of reality at this point in my life, but I'm more I would love to hear more about the winterization thing. So what happens? We don't rent it out over the winter right now?
We'll rent the fields, but the building is constructed where we have to drain the water, shut everything down. So there's no restrooms. Okay. So if there is a rental, they'll bring in porta potties, and the renter pays for those porta potties. Okay. We don't, but the winterization of the building would allow greater use.
Is there any information that we can receive in terms of potential usage during the winter to get a good idea of what? If it's going to cost us $20,000 to winterize it, then we should have an expectation of what we're going to be able to recoup that cost for a period of time. I don't have any data on how much people would want to use it, so I don't want to make it. I'm assuming they'll come. I'd rather know that the need and the want is there.
My question with the winterization is we still heat it, even though we winterize it.
Certain areas will shut down.
But we still, it's not like we winterize it completely and don't turn on the heat. Period, right?
Some of the areas we do shut down all the way.
Okay. But the whole building, we're still that's what I'm getting at, right? Is we're winterizing it, but yet we're still to some degree heating the building. If we're going to winterize it, then let's not heat the building, period. And the whole building shouldn't be heated. That's what I'm getting at. Is we, and I can tell you from experience, I was in there last December, and I walked into the concession stand, and it's still 60 degrees, 70 degrees in the concession stand in December. But yeah, we winterized it. So the heater is kicking on. So I'm just and I get it, it's minimal to winterize it, but then let's cut the heat out, right? And if you're going to winterize something, winterize it, whatever. I'm fine either way. I'm just, we go through the trouble of flushing the line, we go through all that, but yet we still have the heat out. I'm not saying that it gives you, I'm just.
Well, we put it down to the minimum heat, because you don't want the floor to start shifting and then you're going to have all this traffic and stuff. So that's why you can keep it a little bit, but it's put down so units are kicking on. But the building was not designed to handle 30-degree weather. So we do have to train the line.
And was that a spec?
It was a known decision in terms of controlling traffic.
So we specifically asked somebody to build something against.
Anybody else have any other questions regarding that, or do we only have?
It doesn't sound like we have anybody to winterize it, so I'm fine.
Anything else, Dr. Kepler, on the use of school facilities?
No, I think we have some direction and what we can work on.
Okay, thank you. We're gonna move to public comment then. Mrs. Clee? Next. Mrs. Blanchard? Okay.
Only the checkbox.
Okay, gotcha. Oh, okay, I thought you were signed up to speak. You look nothing like you did when I called you. All right, that's it for buildings and grounds.
We're ready to the staffing and administration then?
I think it's, is it finance?
Oh, finance? Oh, I apologize. I didn't realize it was finance. Just barely on the head.
As we move into finance, the first item on the agenda is the new story tuition contract.
This is just a normal procedural item as we have students placed outside with some services. Some of the contractors or schools we work with, we approve an overall umbrella contract, and we work underneath that regardless of how many students are sent. This company likes to do the contract per student, and so we will need to approve and have students are placed. So that's all this is for the new story.
And that is for motion.
Correct.
Any questions on that? Okay, 22-23 transportation agreements with Boyo Transportation.
So just a little background, Boyo provides mostly all of our special education transportation. So most of the transportation Boyo provides are via vans. They do help AP Bucks, who is our main transporter. They will also help them with bus drivers. We'll provide additional vehicles if Bucks doesn't have enough drivers and or vehicles to meet our needs. This contract, the Boyo had a contract, 2-year contract with the district that expired in June 30th of 2022. So this is just a 1-year agreement. The reasoning for me behind that is our main transportation contractor, AP Bucks, their transportation contract is up at June of 2023. And it just makes a little bit more sense that we would be looking at all of our transportation all at the same time, rather than kind of how we had it staggered before. So that's the push behind this just being a 1-year agreement for transportation. There are 2 agreements here. The first one is for that home to school transportation. The other portion of the agreement is for extracurricular transportation. And it just notes that the contractor gets paid differently based on school transportation versus extracurricular transportation. The regular school transportation, we do receive a portion of subsidies from the state. It's based on the number of miles you order on the bus and those types of things. The other portion of the contract that would be for extracurriculars is not subsidized in any way by anything. That's all district paid for the transportation of those students. Once again, Boyo doesn't provide a ton of athletic transportation. They're just filling in gaps that AP Bucks can't fill as needed. But they will provide a lot of field trip extracurriculars because some of our special needs students are traveling for experience and doing those types of things, and they will be helping with those types of things.
Questions from the board?
I just have a question. For the Boyo, since they do the vans, most likely for those especially, do any of the drivers undergo any type of training or like that as far as how to handle?
Absolutely. Every driver goes through a training process. Those that are trained to drive buses actually usually start off on the vans so they can get used to managing those students, having additional, so they get training, extensive training on bus management, called classroom management when we're in the classroom, but doing those types of things. Also where to go and where to turn if they see issues. There are mandatory reporters like the rest of us, so they go through that training as well if they see any suspect any type of abuse or anything like that. Through the process, they're training them how to report that properly. Require all the same clearances that any district employee requires.
So that takes us to public comments. Mr. Giretti, any further comments? And that concludes the finance committee for this evening.
All right, wonderful. So the first item on the staffing and administration committee this evening is board policy second reading.
And in the second reading, no changes from your first review.
Okay, and that would be board policy number 819, suicide awareness, prevention, and response. Are there any comments, questions, or concerns on that policy? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to the second item on the agenda, the athletic department trip. There is a recommendation from the administration to approve the athletic department's school-sponsored varsity/junior varsity baseball spring training field trip from March 16th to 19th, 2023 to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, where students would attend a Coastal Carolina baseball game and tour the campus.
Pretty much the same trip as norm. They do have JVs listed as well.
I have a concern with this. I was told there was going to be two proposals. Sorry, I don't mean to be completely upset, but I just want to tell you, I made it very clear last time we talked about this time we talked about this, and I asked for this to not be dumped on us. Again, I'm fine with what the second proposal was supposed to be. From what I understand, there's supposed to be two proposals. One was to take JV, nobody would miss school, they would go, they would do more team bonding, and they would go to a different type of thing. And then if that wasn't acceptable, then they would just move to a week, 2 weeks later or whatever, and just take varsity, do like what they normally do, the Myrtle Beach thing, everything. I was fine with either or. I'm not in favor of JV and missing school. And I don't know how many times, personally, I have to say that. But I got nothing against baseball. I was a baseball dad, a baseball kid. I'm not a dad anymore of that, but I'm kind of getting tired of at least the direction or whatever just completely blatantly being disregarded and just thrown again. I mean, first of all, visits to college as a freshman and a sophomore, I know this. I'm heavily involved in the recruiting process. That can be a violation. You are not to be doing official visits. You're not to be doing anything until a certain age.
They're there watching a baseball game as their visit.
But that's not education. But that's not education. Here's what I'm going to tell you. That's the biggest BS I've seen on an educational trip to go watch a baseball game. Then go watch a baseball game. Right?
See their forms that come through.
I don't disagree, but they don't require my approval, right? I mean, come up with something there. I mean, if they're going to go watch a baseball game, we got the Harrisburg Senators here. You know, that's local, that's whatever. What I've been told so many things on why we do this Myrtle Beach trip. I mean, I sat with Neil Weber. I was told the reason they do this trip is because we didn't have the facilities early March to be able to practice in the correct conditions. We built $5 million turf facility that now is an acceptable thing, and we're still doing it. I was told, this trip has been controversy, multiple years with kids that did go on the trip that shouldn't go on the trip. I mean, it's just led to kind of indecision. And at this point, we're not. I mean, again, I'm not going to open the door for every JV team and to just. There has to be a distinction between varsity and JV. I mean that for every sport. I mean, it's not just baseball. I mean, if football, they don't even practice together. I'm really disappointed that both proposals didn't come, or the heads up wasn't given. I feel kind of blindsided by this.
They looked at two options. They looked at going the prior weekend, which does coincide with some in-service days on a Friday, Monday. That trip, the Myrtle facility with which they visit is not open that week, which is why they were looking at that option, and they would have gone to North Carolina to Baseball USA. And what they were struggling to find is high schools locally willing to do scrimmages with them, to meet their 2 scrimmages for varsity, and in this case request 2 scrimmages for JV. So they looked at having to push it back the second weekend, on March 16th to 19th, is when the Myrtle facility opens for their high school spring programs. So that's why they're at this. And the only reason, the rest of the board doesn't even know that there was 2 proposals on the table. I think, Josh, that's because out of respect to you, I gave you a heads up.
Yeah, I didn't even know it was going to really come. I saw that, and then all of a sudden I looked, and that's where I'm frustrated with. No other sport does JV scrimmages. So again, Bernie, I'm sorry, I'll stop with that. This is a different question like that.
I have a question here too. In the past, this has happened over the long weekend, which students, they don't miss school because they're able to go on the red days, which are Friday and Monday, and varsity has always gone in the past. And that's something that as a board, I believe we agreed we would continue to support. Going on the Friday, going on the Monday, and not having to miss any school with varsity. Last year when we had this conversation, there was also a few other factors that came in. For example, middle school, they had middle school practices and some middle school programming in the fall. Not last year because it was canceled the year before. And the conversation was that in order to continue to support this trip and perhaps bring in more students, which would be the JV, that we would bring back programming for some of our younger students and continue to build the program. So my question is, do we have some middle school programming on the agenda for this fall?
I don't know.
That certainly would play a part in my support for bringing more students on the trip. At this point in time right now, I would support not missing school on the Friday or the Monday to continue with varsity, as we have done in the past. And that's what I'm happy to support moving forward. As long as we continue to talk about some of those other factors that could be brought in as well.
I'm in support of the varsity just going.
I've been on this board now for almost 7 years, and this is something that I've always been concerned about, regardless. It doesn't have to be sporting trips, it could be anything. As a teacher, I know how disruptive it is when we have a group of students miss a class. And we're always told, oh, they're responsible for everything they miss. Well, depending upon how many are in your class, it puts an extra burden on an already stressed out teacher to help that kid get caught up. Plus, it's limiting you to what you can do as a teacher in that class. My feeling is I will say yes to any trip that does not take students away from classroom instruction. And pick a date, I'm going to vote for it. But if they're missing time, regardless of what the trip is, I just apologize.
That's kind of where my mind about the JV. It's primarily 9th graders and sophomores, right? Kids that are just learning the high school experience, just dealing with it all. And to miss school to do that, again, at the varsity level, that's where probably you and I disagree. You've got obviously some better skill, you've got whatever, but you're taking on the extra commitment to participate in varsity sports, which therefore, I think, educational-wise, you've taken on that extra commitment. But like I said, you know what my thoughts are. Anybody else?
I don't know. I don't even know. The missing of the school doesn't concern me as much just because sometimes real life experiences are just as,
Yeah.
you know, important. But I guess I'm like I'm on the outside looking in on this whole baseball thing. But so the dates don't bother me so much, but I guess you guys do make some good points about the JV, but again, I just don't know I don't know.
That's what, I have no problem with the missing school for
Yeah,
varsity.
it doesn't
I just have a
matter.
problem with the missing school for JV.
Yeah.
Like, that's why I said, that's where I
Yeah.
probably disagree with Larry, that I'm
Yeah.
fine with the missing school for varsity. I mean, if varsity's on that trip and just varsity, you got my approval.
So what's the remedy?
But I mean, the parents sign off to send their kids to do this, right? I mean, obviously.
Kind of to Dr. Kepler's point, right? You know, all the requests for educational trips, I can tell you, a lot of parents sign off on a lot of things, right? So, I mean, the remedy right now is,
But then what you're saying, there's restrictions on touring college campuses at a certain age?
there is.
Official visits.
Official visit, so that's not considered an official visit.
No.
What is an official visit? What determines what an official
That
visit is?
I would-
Having the coach speak to.
I'm gonna tell you, I wasn't here when we approved these coaches and stuff, you know, conflict or whatever. For me, there's some questionability there, and I can tell you, official visits left up to interpretation, but touring a campus, they're gonna go into the boys, they're gonna go to the baseball locker room, they know these people. I mean, again,
And that's allowed under NCAA.
yeah, it's allowed, but, I mean, again, why? I mean, that, again, I'm just one person, I'm not.
Can I ask, do we approve other sports team, any other group to miss school consistently for a field trip of this nature?
Band goes to Florida during the school.
Band goes to Florida once every 4 years, and they miss some school, I believe. Our kids that go to outdoor ed as advisors miss school for a week. Wrestling had a tournament where they missed some school.
Middle school, I'd say.
Actually, wrestling did not miss school.
They didn't miss, they went after school.
That was a big thing. They left at 4 p.m. on Friday.
That was middle school too, right?
High school and middle school. Yeah. I just to make it clear, I'm not a fan of the middle school going to that tournament this year either. I'm an equal opportunity biased person.
I'd be interested, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. Is this the trip last year that we did not approve?
We did approve varsity only.
Okay.
And they went over the long weekend, correct?
No, they missed school.
They did?
Yeah, I don't know.
I have to look back.
Yeah, 2 years ago.
Yeah, last year they missed school because that was the biggest reason.
And I made the same comment.
Yeah, Larry made the same comment last year. They missed school last year. Like I said, I'm varsity. I'm fine. I'm just not.
I'd be interested to learn the educational components of watching a baseball game of this caliber, you know, for our students. Looking at in the past, where our students have gone to play baseball at the next level, you know, hasn't been near Coastal Carolina or of that caliber. So I think more appropriately, you know, if we're going to be touring and that such, let's go to places to where our students in the past have actually gone. I don't think that's.
I don't think that's the goal of going to a Coastal Carolina game. I haven't spoken to them about the specifics. I think it's a team activity while they're down there. Seeing high quality baseball game as a team.
Yeah, they're listed under educational.
And I believe it would be.
So to Mike's point, does this want to move out of committee in there, or are we pretty much saying to come back with a different proposal? One from that, Mama from that,
Bring it back.
bring it back. So there's 4, you need 5.
Let's consider implementing
Mary Ann, what are you?
the middle school
Bring
program.
it back?
What if they had to change the junior for the varsity and junior varsity go together to something like this? Are there any other types of teams that go to something similar where they take the varsity and the junior varsity?
There are. I couldn't sit here and name them. I know from conversations. There's other Pennsylvania District 3 teams that go to this facility and take
within the
JVs.
school,
Yes.
within Palmyra.
Not Palmyra. No, this is unique.
Right.
Yeah. I think at this point, Mary Ann was a bring it back, Kayla's fence, Mandy, bring it back. Mike Spence put aired on,
No, you're correct.
so Mike was fence, but he wants to err on the side of caution to bring it back. I'll bring it back. Christine's bring it back, Larry bring it back. I think-
Yeah, there's not support to move this forward. Okay, I have my direction.
All right, and then the last item on the agenda would be public comment. Ms. Fisher, is there
I don't believe there is any.
no public comment for this evening?
No.
So at this time, the board's gonna move into executive session. We've got to review some personnel.
Before we do that, Nick did have, I don't think he signed up to speak or ask questions on a specific committee. It was just a question. Never mind. I just want to take care of that. Make sure we can send you home without it.
Yeah, so again, the board will move into executive committee. We've got some personnel issues to discuss, along with some legal matters. So, thank you all for coming.